In May 1947, a weakened elderly figure emerges from a vehicle atop a remote California hillside. This unfolds the shadowy tale of America's most extravagant entertainment haven, Hearst Castle. For nearly 3 decades, it served as the ultimate retreat for the elite and influential. Celebrities, leaders, and tycoons lounged poolside with cocktails, twirled beneath gilded vaults, strolled past marble sculptures and zebras roaming the grounds. Yet on this evening, the revelry has faded. The media mogul behind it all, William Randolph Hearst, faces dwindling funds and fleeting days. The fortress that once embodied dominance now lingers as a subdued confinement he struggles to sustain. And lurking beneath each lavish gathering was a concealed truth he sought to shield from the nation. What drove America's top press baron to invest a vast sum in a mountaintop retreat he would eventually forsake? How did a young dreamer of fortresses transform that vision into unyielding stone barriers that gradually eroded his vast holdings? This goes beyond a mere elegant residence. It's a chronicle of fixation, wealth, and the steep toll of pursuing an ambition excessively. So what unfolds when your ideal abode begins devouring you? Chapter 1. The evening the fortress fell silent. The estate endures on the crest where peaks embrace the Pacific. Guides lead tours along corridors once alive with merriment. Tourists dip into waters that once welcomed Tinseltown's luminaries. But the hush weighs profoundly today. The celebrations have concluded. To grasp how Hearst Castle evolved into an icon, trace back to the youth who envisioned it, the domain that funded it, and the compulsion that almost unraveled it all. The narrative begins with the soirees. By the 1930s outset, Saint-Simeon ranked as the nation's premier personal abode. Weekend visitors journeyed by rail, then ascended twisting hillside paths in a convoy of luxury cars. At the summit awaited the unbelievable, a Renaissance-style Spanish edifice atop a Californian rise, encircled by the world's biggest private menagerie. The Neptune pool spanned 104 feet, bordered in Vermont marble and overlooked by a Roman temple frontage, transported piece by piece from abroad. The interior Roman pool shimmered in azure and amber hues beneath a vaulted roof adorned with mosaic work. Sprawling guest houses, akin to estates themselves, speckled the slopes. Zebras roamed manicured pastures. Hearst roamed the premises in a casual pullover, highlighting fresh sculptures, landscapes, and expanding sections. Friday evenings featured elegant suppers in the grand hall. Film icons dined beside lawmakers. Filmmakers proposed concepts to executives. Hearst commanded from the heart of an extended dining table, with Marion Davies beside him, ensuring chats stayed breezy and attendees at ease. Post-meal. Films screened in his personal cinema, followed by dances, games of pool, or strolls amid illuminated gardens. Guidelines were firm yet straightforward. Attire appropriately for meals, retire by midnight, avoid commerce at the table, and absolutely refrain from critiquing Hearst or his publications publicly. Nearly all adhered. The splendor was unmatched, the privilege priceless, the occasion unparalleled, too precious to jeopardize. Here stood the embodiment of American aspiration, carved in rock and stone. Evidence, a San Francisco lad could craft something surpassing old-world aristocrats, more selective than elite societies, more buzzed about than the presidential home. Yet come May 1947, that vision crumbled. Spotlights remained off. Bungalows stood vacant. Tools for building lay corroded on incomplete patios. Hearst resided in seclusion in Beverly Hills, his vitality waning, his assets depleted by years of outspending even a media dynasty's income. The bastion erected to showcase his might now marked his decline. What bridged the raucous bashes and the still chambers? How does one devote almost 30 years to erecting a stronghold, only to see it slip away before the end? The explanation weaves in sensational reporting, shattered unions, steadfast designers, a faithful companion, and a core reality. Certain visions prove too immense to complete and too costly to relinquish. This recounts that vision. The account of William Randolph Hearst reshaping a desolate California slope into the grandest social citadel in U.S. lore. How he stocked it with treasures seized from overseas manors and visitors drawn from cinema's elite. How he wielded it as a platform for influence, an escape from controversy, and a tribute to endless desires. It's likewise the saga of those who constructed it alongside him, shared its spaces, and witnessed its fade as resources ebbed. The structure persists, but its creator has passed, and the festivities he hosted echo faintly through its stone corridors. Chapter 2. The young lad raised in a grand home that never felt like his own. His fixation took root in childhood. William Randolph Hearst entered the world in 1863 in San Francisco, offspring of George Hearst, a rugged mining tycoon who hit it big with gold in Nevada and silver in South Dakota, and Phoebe Apperson Hearst, a Missouri schoolteacher who wed into fortune, yet clung to her modest roots. The household brimmed with riches, but to high society's discerning eye, it fell short on sophistication. George Hearst was a no-nonsense type, sharp on ore veins and land rights, yet indifferent to fine arts, social graces, or facades. Phoebe stood in stark contrast. She craved elegance, social standing. She envisioned her boy maturing into a true gentleman, far from the grimy image of a miner's child with calloused palms and crude speech. Thus, she imposed structure on their San Francisco residence. Formal attire at meals, piano sessions with classical pieces, instructors in French, volumes of art shipped over from Europe. The adolescent Willie dwelled amid opulence, yet yearned for affection. His dad frequently vanished to mining sites or to Washington as a U.S. senator. His mom hovered nearby, insistent and unyielding, forever urging him toward an elusive pinnacle of masculinity. The residence seemed wholly hers, the regulations entirely her domain. Even the masterpieces adorning the walls, Renaissance canvases, ancient Greek statues, lavish Persian carpets, served as her bold claim to outsiders, insisting the Hearsts merited a place among San Francisco's established elite, who sneered at freshly minted mining wealth as vulgar and transient. Willie grasped young that constant scrutiny defined his life, forever deeming him insufficiently polished. Despite possessing it all, the child sensed true ownership eluded him entirely. Then arrived the journey that reshaped his path. In 1873, at age 10, Phoebe whisked him away for an 18-month odyssey across Europe. They explored Parisian museums, Florentine art collections, and chateaux beside the Rhine. Phoebe delved into art and design with academic rigor. Willie, however, drew a deeper inspiration. He witnessed authority etched in enduring rock. Europe's aristocrats resided in fortresses, stocking them with heirlooms amassed through generations. Striding those corridors equaled treading evidence of legacy, endurance, affirmation that one's lineage warranted structures surpassing lifetimes. Willie yearned for precisely that, not noble ranks. America scorned such hierarchies. Rather, the tangible symbols, the fortress, the masterpieces, the burdensome heritage that awed guests, compelling them to recognize the site's transcendent stature. The idea took hold. Years would pass before it flourished. Yet the youngster, dwarfed in his mother's estate, already envisioned a domain fully his. Returning to San Francisco, Willie navigated education with mixed results. Intelligent yet scattered, engaging yet troublesome, he perpetually challenged the limits his mother sought to impose. She dispatched him eastward to Harvard, banking on its rigor to smooth his wild traits and mold him into her dreamed-of refined man. The plan backfired. Harvard booted him out following a stunt where he gifted the staff chamber pots etched with faculty surnames. Lavish and meticulously orchestrated, it epitomized Hearst-style extravagance, fueling boyish defiance. Still, the dismissal barely registered. By that point, George Hearst had snapped up a struggling rag, the San Francisco Examiner, largely to bolster his political aims. Willie persuaded his father to hand him the reins. At 23, affluent, impulsive, and eager to validate himself beyond his mother's judgments, he seized the chance. It emerged that journalism suited a youth who'd felt sidelined in his family abode. Papers empowered you to shape public views. They allowed strikes against foes via ink where retaliation proved tricky. They enabled crafting something bold, overt, and indisputably personal. And operated shrewdly, they generated funds ample for acquiring strongholds. Chapter 3. Forging a realm through bold stories and dread. The San Francisco Examiner teetered on collapse when Hearst assumed command in 1887. Readership languished, ads trickled in, and rivals outshone it. His father anticipated a muted demise. Hearst envisioned otherwise. He scrutinized Joseph Pulitzer's New York World, America's top-selling daily then, extracting a stark, ruthless insight. Raw data bores. Narratives captivate. Pulitzer knew audiences shunned bland accounts of municipal deliberations. They hungered for spectacle. They sought protagonists and antagonists. They desired emotional jolts from their daily read. Hearst embraced this wisdom and amplified it beyond precedent. He recruited top talent, compensating them handsomely over rivals. He invested in superior presses, deploying them for sprawling front-page visuals, sketches of slayings, catastrophes, outrages. He demanded banners and fonts so enormous, passers-by could decipher them from afar. He instructed his journalists to pursue tales that stirred readers' emotions, whether rage, fear, or astonishment. Accounts of crimes got outsized attention, far beyond their actual significance. High society scandals were probed with the same vigor as homicides. Instances of political graft, whether genuine or inflated, were laid bare on the front page with indignant outrage. If a report lacked sufficient drama, Hearst's editors had ways to amplify it. A blaze transformed into a calamity. A simple dispute escalated into a bitter rivalry. A small mishap was recast as a close call with disaster. The strategy paid off. Readership surged. Advertisers piled in. In just a few years, the Examiner turned a profit and rose to prominence. Hearst demonstrated he could conquer an industry his father had never fully grasped. Yet San Francisco couldn't contain the expanding visions brewing within him. In 1895, Hearst acquired the New York Morning Journal and transported his approach to the East Coast. New York stood as the grandest arena for American journalism, and Hearst showed up primed for combat. His chief competitor was Pulitzer, now overseeing his domain from a gilded skyscraper in Lower Manhattan. The pair ignited a circulation war that reshaped the nation's press landscape. Hearst lured away Pulitzer's top talent, writers and illustrators, with higher offers. He slashed the price to a single penny per issue, accepting losses to poach subscribers. He rolled out color sections on Sundays, packing them with comic strips that became nationwide crazes. His publications roared with even greater intensity, featured larger images, and spun more outrageous narratives. Reporters of the era dubbed it yellow journalism, inspired by a beloved comic character rendered in yellow ink. The term described lurid reporting, rooted in partial truths, manipulative sentiments, and brazen hype. Hearst embraced the moniker with defiance. Respectability held no appeal for him. Victory did. Then Cuba entered the picture. By 1896, The island was locked in a struggle for freedom from Spanish rule. Hearst spotted his chance and pounced. His newspapers unleashed a barrage of daily dispatches on Spanish cruelties, some factual, others overstated, and a handful wholly fabricated. He dispatched illustrators to depict harrowing images of Spanish troops assaulting helpless Cuban villagers. He ran supposed missives from tormented Cubans, pleading for U.S. involvement. When the USS Maine detonated in Havana Harbor that February of 1898, claiming 260 American lives, Hearst's journal pinned the blame on Spain without waiting for proof. The banner headline hurled charges. The accompanying sketch portrayed Spanish agents setting underwater explosives. Columns clamored for military action. Scholars today still argue over the Maine's true demise. The era's formal probe pointed to a mine. Contemporary experts leaned toward an onboard coal bunker blaze that set off the munitions by mistake. But back in 1898, the concealed facts hardly signified. What counted was the thunderous narrative Hearst broadcast, which millions swallowed whole. The United States declared war on Spain. Hearst's sales skyrocketed, and William Randolph Hearst absorbed the perilously potent insight of his career. Command the narrative, and you command the world. Shout with enough force, and truths will warp to match your version. He had uncovered his true influence. Now he craved a fortress fit for royalty. Chapter 4. Meeting Julia Morgan, the unassuming prodigy behind the scenes. By 1900, Hearst commanded papers in New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles. His media domain was expanding rapidly. His wealth was unassailable, yet he lacked a true sanctuary. He possessed holdings dotted nationwide, city flats in New York, a grand estate in San Francisco, passed down from his late mother in 1919. None quelled the longing sparked by his boyhood journey through Europe. They made for impressive residences, but not true palaces. That's when the ranch came to mind. His father had snapped up 40,000 acres of coastal property near San Simeon, California, back in 1865. The terrain was stunning yet isolated. Undulating hills dotted with oaks, gazing out over the Pacific from lofty cliffs. George Hearst had raised cattle there and taken his son on sporadic outings. Young Willie cherished those escapes. The vastness, the endless heavens, the sea breezes, the sense that this sprawling expanse all belonged to his kin. Following his mother's passing, Hearst claimed the ranch as his own. At 56, with riches beyond most folks' wildest dreams, he was at last prepared to erect a lasting monument. He sought out an architect. In 1919, most affluent gentlemen would have turned to renowned East Coast practices, esteemed outfits crafting in time-honored traditions for society's elite. Hearst opted otherwise. He selected Julia Morgan, a 47-year-old designer, operating discreetly from a San Francisco studio. Morgan defied norms across the board where it counted. She was a female pioneer in a field utterly ruled by males. She became the inaugural female student in the architecture program at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, learning from the very instructors who had shaped creators of Europe's majestic landmarks. Back in California, she established a thriving firm, crafting residences, places of worship, and public structures with unwavering focus on stability, balance, and workmanship. Petite and reserved in speech, she embodied precision. In contrast to Hearst's bold and spontaneous nature, Morgan approached everything with systematic care and practicality. While he envisioned sweeping spectacles, she focused on essentials like supporting beams, water management, and seismic resilience. Hearst had engaged her previously for modest jobs, remodels, extensions, and structures on his lands, relying on her expertise. Even more, he valued her ability to truly hear him out. Unlike some architects who imposed their visions, Morgan absorbed clients' desires, and devised ways to realize them. That year, 1919, Hearst escorted her to the summit at San Simeon and remarked along the lines of, quote, "Zero, a modest retreat." Morgan instantly recognized the understatement. Their history together had taught her that his endeavors invariably swelled, morphed, and ballooned midstream. She was aware of his habit of importing art and relics by the freighter full. She understood he sought a scale befitting his media empire, wealth, and self-image. What escaped her foresight was how this so-called modest retreat would dominate her ensuing 28 years. They kicked off with preliminary designs. Hearst envisioned a central residence atop the hill, dubbing it La Casa Grande, encircled by 3 guest houses. He craved a Mediterranean flair, evoking the Spanish missions of his youth, but amplified in splendor, opulence, and intricacy. Towers, terraces, pools, he specified them all. Morgan absorbed it all, jotting details, surveying the terrain, gauging the breezes. Back in her San Francisco studio, she set to sketching. The collaboration that developed was unparalleled in U.S. architectural annals. Hearst bombarded her with missives brimming with concepts, doodles, gripes, and directives. She responded via blueprints, budget projections, and subtle adjustments. When his notions clashed with the laws of nature, finances, or sound construction, he pursued the unattainable. She rendered it feasible. He shifted course. She pivoted accordingly. Building commenced in 1919, though neither anticipated its perpetual, unfinished state. Chapter 5. A playground for a man who never grew up. The initial structures rose swiftly. Morgan prioritized the trio of guest houses, Casa del Mar, Casa del Monte, and Casa del Sol, each expansive enough to stand as a standalone estate. They encircled the peak like watchful guardians, anticipating the primary dwelling that would ascend amid them. Hearst's impatience precluded full completion. By 1920, he was ushering visitors to the evolving site, lodging them in tents alongside the fresh guest houses as workers toiled nearby. He relished displaying the work in progress, gesturing at skeletal bases and declaring, "This spot will hold the tower." He delighted in guiding guests through roofless chambers, vividly portraying the Renaissance pieces, sculpted mantels, and woven hangings destined to adorn them. The castle expanded in phases, fluidly altering with Hearst's maturing preferences. His frequent European jaunts yielded acquisitions of whole chambers from raised chateaux and abbeys, Spanish vaults, Italian portals, French hearths, Gothic pews. Crated and dispatched to California, he instructed Morgan to integrate them. If a vault mismatched her planned space, she reconfigured it. If a portal necessitated relocating a partition, she did so. Hearst handled the endeavor as the planet's priciest plaything, assembling his castle like a youngster stacking bricks, tacking on elements for visual appeal, indifferent to flawless alignment or design orthodoxy. Yet Morgan orchestrated harmony from the chaos. She wove his clashing whims into a unified whole, even as it flouted conventional architectural tenets. La Casa Grande soared 4 levels high, crowned by paired campaniles piercing the heavens. Its exterior blended Spanish colonial accents with Mediterranean dimensions and Gothic flourishes. Within, spaces transitioned seamlessly, lacking a clear structural rationale. A Gothic reading room adjoined a Spanish arcade. A Moorish lounge connected to a Renaissance sleeping chamber. The assembly room, the home's core, extended 100 feet, flanked by pews from an Italian abbey and draped in Flemish weavings. It evoked less a family space than a regal chamber masquerading as rustic elegance. Next arrived the pools. The Neptune pool outdoors started with a straightforward boxy layout. Hearst dismissed the initial design as far too ordinary. Morgan experimented with adding classical columns, which improved it somewhat. Yet it still failed to capture the magnificence he craved. She iterated repeatedly, leading to numerous full-scale overhauls of the Neptune pool across 17 years, until it achieved its ultimate splendor. Encircled by 104 feet of Vermont marble, its turquoise waters were backed by a Roman temple front and accompanied by marble figures of Neptune and the Nereids, drawing from the ancient Roman baths that Hearst had admired in Italy. The indoor Roman pool featured every inch clad in hand-set glass mosaic tiles in shades of blue, gold, and orange, arranged in intricate geometric motifs. 8 marble sculptures of deities and legendary figures stood sentinel along the walls. Soft light streamed through alabaster globe fixtures, infusing the water with an inner luminescence. It evoked the kind of opulent retreat an emperor like Caesar might have commissioned, assuming boundless wealth and a California designer fixated on perfection. As the structures expanded, so did the zoo. Hearst brought in exotic creatures from distant lands: zebras, emus, kangaroos, elk, buffalo, and even polar bears. They wandered in semi-wild freedom across the slopes, contained within thoughtfully placed fences. Visitors ascending the twisting driveway would spot zebras nibbling grass beside the oaks, blending African savanna beasts with California countryside in a way that seemed utterly ordinary. Each year introduced fresh enhancements: a tennis court, an additional library, extra accommodations for guests, another viewing terrace, and a secluded airstrip. The endeavor lacked a completion timeline, as Hearst showed no desire to halt. The act of constructing was its own reward. The pursuit of possessions was its essence. He wasn't merely fashioning a residence. He was forging evidence that William Randolph Hearst could claim whatever he desired, disregarding regulations, financial limits, or logical design principles. By 1925, San Simeon had gained widespread renown. Tinseltown was aware of it. Washington insiders murmured about it, securing an invitation for a weekend atop the hill, ranked as California's premier social prize. The celebrations were on the verge of starting. Chapter 6. Marion Davies, the comedian in the gilded enclosure. The castle required a regal figure at its heart. Hearst discovered her back in 1915, well before any construction commenced at San Simeon. Marion Davies was performing as a chorus dancer in a Broadway production when their paths crossed. She was just 18. He was 52, wed with 5 sons and already among America's most influential figures. Her wit, affability, agility of mind, and irresistible allure outweighed any traditional notions of attractiveness or elite pedigree in his eyes. He tumbled deeply for her. In under a year, he was bankrolling her entry into films, leveraging his media empire to hype her pictures, and striving to catapult her to fame via sheer capital and hype. She possessed authentic skill, precise comedic flair, an effortless, on-camera vibe, the knack for breathing vitality into subpar scripts. Yet the murmurs trailed her relentlessly. Marion Davies owed her prominence solely to William Randolph Hearst's decree. Those murmurs weren't wholly unfounded. Hearst invested millions in her professional path. He established Cosmopolitan Pictures expressly to craft her movies. He coerced cinema proprietors into screening them. He directed his reviewers to acclaim them, occasionally overriding their honest opinions. As the era of talkies dawned and many silent-era performers faded, Marion transitioned successfully because Hearst hired top-tier filmmakers, scriptwriters, and extravagant production designs. He sought to secure her an enduring foothold in Hollywood through purchase. She could never fully step out from beneath that backing. Peers in the field admired her performances, but chafed at his meddlesome oversight. Audiences enjoyed her films, yet recognized her as Hearst's paramour, not his spouse. Millicent Hearst, his lawful wife, remained in New York raising their 5 boys, maintaining a distant marriage without ever consenting to dissolution. Marion forewent any marital band. She was never presented as Mrs. Hearst. She stayed forever Miss Davies, the performer sharing life with a wedded tycoon. San Simeon served as both her sanctuary and her confinement. There, Marion acted as the de facto entertainer. She welcomed arrivals, sustained lively dialogue, recalled personal details and quirks for each person, and eased the prickly vanities of Tinseltown's elite, amid Hearst's rigid, protocol-heavy dinners. Her kindness was sincere. She'd discreetly support performers battling drink. She'd secure jobs for aspiring dancers in need. When Hearst's tempers grew brooding and domineering, she'd diffuse the strain with humor, mimicry, and an innate empathy that no fortune could replicate. She also turned to alcohol. It started lightly amid gatherings, then became routine, intensifying over time. The burden of endless scandal sheets, the nightly demand to embody the buoyant greeter, the paradox of Hearst's devotion clashing with societal rejection. It all took its toll. The Summit estate, appearing idyllic from afar, often resembled to her a lavish jail without parole. Yet she endured the controversies, the speculations, Hearst's botched bids for office and personal humiliations, even his monetary woes. She persisted, as those close to her later attested, out of true affection for him. It wasn't the vast empire or the sensational headlines or the cutthroat maneuvers of his media outlets that captured her heart. In fact, she often recoiled at their ruthless edge. What she cherished was the more personal side of William Randolph Hearst, the quirky, open-handed fellow who revealed a tender vulnerability away from the spotlight. He constructed a 14-room bungalow for her right on the MGM lot in Los Angeles, an extravagant flourish that tapped straight into the studio's electrical system, like a miniature fortress. He showered her with jewels, tweaked film scripts to play up her talents, and sought her input on matters ranging from newsroom initiatives to deciding which historic tapestries belonged in specific chambers of the castle. Whenever his schedule allowed, he'd whisk her away by plane or car each weekend to that elevated retreat, granting them brief escapes where they could ignore the outside world's constraints entirely. Marion brought a cozy vibe to San Simeon. She transformed Hearst's grand tribute to his own grandeur into a space that resembled a real family dwelling. While Julia Morgan served as the castle's designer and Hearst its driving force, the true soul that drew visitors back time and again was Marion Davies. Absent her influence, the soirees would have come across as mere spectacles. With her touch, they evoked the intimacy of friendly get-togethers. Almost. Chapter 7. Hollywood on the Hill, America's most extravagant party destination. The weekend ritual rarely varied. Every Friday afternoon, a luxury train car departed Los Angeles, ferrying 15 to 30 select visitors. By dusk, it arrived in San Luis Obispo, where Hearst's chauffeured cars stood ready to ferry them along the twisting 5-mile ascent to the castle. The journey upward lasted close to an hour. Passengers gazed out at the scenery evolving from seaside brush to hills sprinkled with oaks, the breeze turning crisp with elevation. Now and then they'd spot zebras or buffalo wandering in the fading sunlight, creatures utterly out of place on a California estate, yet seamlessly woven into Hearst's whimsical domain. Finally, the path bent for the last time, unveiling the castle atop the ridge. Its pale spires shimmered against the twilight, illuminated by spotlights that bathed the pools and patios in a surreal glow. It resembled a fantasy realm or a cinematic backdrop, which was exactly the intention. Regulars included Charlie Chaplin, Clark Gable, Greta Garbo, Cary Grant, Carol Lombard, and Joan Crawford. All made appearances. as did virtually every prominent figure from Hollywood's heyday. Alongside filmmakers, studio executives, authors, and the odd dignitary or industrialist. Invitations arrived capriciously, blending the elite in delightful chaos. A vaudeville funnyman might dine beside a high court judge. A stage performer could chat poolside with an English aristocrat. The estate operated under guidelines that blended casual ease with unspoken rigor. Visitors received room assignments either in La Casa Grande or the guest houses, all decked out with period pieces from the Renaissance and priceless artworks. Formal attire was required for evenings, with cocktails flowing from 7:30 in the assembly hall, followed by a 9 o'clock meal at a massive refectory table, accommodating up to 40. Hearst claimed the head position, Marion at his side, while others filled seats in no discernible hierarchy. The menu leaned toward unpretentious fare. Amid the lavish surroundings, Hearst favored hearty basics, roasted fowl, fresh produce, modest sweets. He had little patience for fussy French dishes meant only to impress. Condiment squeezes for ketchup and mustard rested casually beside the elegant porcelain and glassware, a subtle nod to the host's roots as the offspring of a simple cattleman. Table talk buzzed with energy, yet stayed within subtle boundaries. Anecdotes flew, rumors swirled, romances sparked, but commerce stayed off limits. Political debates were taboo during meals, and under no circumstances did anyone voice disapproval of Hearst or his press empire in his presence. San Simeon functioned as a sanctuary, free from the grind of production deadlines or career feuds. As long as all acknowledged the master of the hill, post-meal entertainment unfolded in the private screening room, seating about 50, where fresh studio cuts premiered ahead of general release. Moguls provided early reels both as a gesture of respect and self-preservation. A glowing review in Hearst's papers could boost a movie's fortunes. A scathing one might sink it. Marion's pictures invariably drew enthusiastic cheers, regardless of their actual quality. Nobody dared be the one who held back on the chuckles. As the evening wound down, the crowd dispersed into intimate clusters, twirling on the dance floor of a lounge, shooting pool, playing cards, or strolling the silvered gardens as ocean gusts rustled the foliage. The revelry halted abruptly with Hearst's curfew. By midnight, the common areas dimmed and the proprietor retired. Revelers might linger privately in their quarters, but the night's communal show had concluded. Saturday followed a distinct cadence. Activities filled the weekend days at Hearst Castle. Dips in the Neptune or Roman pools, matches on the tennis courts, rides through the surrounding hills on horseback, or relaxing on terraces, bathed in sunlight as staff delivered refreshments and snacks. Certain visitors roamed the vast interiors, awestruck by the array of artwork, woven tapestries, marble sculptures, and ornate ceilings pilfered from European sites and reassembled atop the hill. Some chose to rest or attend to personal writing, like screenplays or letters. The vibe remained relaxed on the surface, yet an implicit understanding lingered below. Your presence here depended on Hearst's invitation. You savored an opulence that surpassed nearly any resort worldwide. In return, you avoided challenging him. Not through written words, not openly, not among his employees. The majority of visitors cherished this dynamic. It offered opportunities to connect with Tinseltown's top figures in an environment that bordered on fantastical. They could encounter masterpieces, typically guarded by ropes, now casually placed in corridors and sleeping quarters. They swam in pools hailed as America's finest, with zebras wandering nearby as if part of an eccentric film shoot. However, a handful of guests sensed something off-putting in the whole affair. They observed Hearst's intense scrutiny over every detail. They recognized the sway his publications held, capable of boosting or demolishing reputations via mere column inches. Beneath the lavish welcome, they detected invisible constraints binding this idyll. tangible, even if elusive. The estate served multiple roles simultaneously: a recreational haven, a gallery, a secluded movie set, a backdrop for its master's displays. It never aspired to, nor pretended to be, an ordinary residence. Rather, it showcased dominance, disguised as a leisurely retreat, and that showcase was on the verge of turning far more ominous. Chapter 8. Power Politics and the Newspaper King. Hearst grew restless, merely overseeing Hollywood's premier weekend retreat or dominating its premier social circle. That was entertaining but insufficient. His true craving was political influence on a scale to rival his wealth and press holdings. By the mid-1920s, his media conglomerate had swelled massively. It encompassed 28 dailies across 18 cities, alongside periodicals, newsreel outfits, and production companies. About a quarter of the U.S. population encountered a Hearst product daily. Thus, 1 in 4 citizens viewed events, at least in part, through William Randolph Hearst's perspective, consciously or otherwise. He wielded this clout with fervor. His outlets promoted issues close to his heart, progressive at times, reactionary others, frequently inconsistent. One season they backed unions, the next they assailed them. He advocated public control of rail lines even as he championed free market principles elsewhere. He resisted U.S. entanglement in old world wars but readily fueled backing for interventions south of the border when advantageous. The sole unwavering element was Hearst personally. His press reflected his whims, vendettas, evolving passions, and grand designs. And those designs included serious forays into politics. He vied for New York City's mayoralty in 1905, falling short by a slim edge. In 1906, he sought the state's governorship and lost once more. Both bids drained his coffers. In the intervals, he funneled funds to allies pledging alignment with his views, only to unleash his editorial might against them with brutal intensity upon letdown. Commanders-in-chief sought his blessing. Lawmakers dreaded his barrages. Officials nationwide scanned Hearst's commentaries before staking out bold stances. His backing wasn't essential for endurance, but it proved invaluable. His opposition, though, was a peril to shun. San Simeon evolved beyond a mere festivity hub. It transformed into a forum for politicking. Legislators ascended the slopes for discreet getaways, hashing out pending legislation, remote from prying eyes. State executives showed up to hash out matters like public works, energy pricing, or fiscal measures at Hearst's behest. Aspiring chief executives undertook journeys to the fortress, cognizant that positive splashy reports in Hearst's rags might tip the scales in a contest. The property provided what office seekers coveted nearly as dearly as exposure: seclusion at San Simeon. Insulated from competing reporters and faction insiders, proposals could be aired, probed, and polished sans documentation. Hearst could delineate his desires plainly. Elected figures could gauge their leeway before risking antagonistic coverage, all posed amiably by the Neptune pool for snapshots, while substantive bargaining unfolded on secluded patios and in subdued parlors post-meal. The boundary separating reporting from partisan scheming didn't merely soften, it dissolved entirely. When Hearst decried a measure, his sheets depicted it as impending doom. When he backed a contender, that figure basked in effusive spotlights up front as rivals endured exposés on minor improprieties, lingering gossip, and selectively highlighted personal flaws. Truth turned pliable instruments, molded to fit Hearst's preferred storyline. His editors knew their role wasn't about delivering unbiased facts. It was about ensuring William Randolph Hearst emerged victorious. Visitors from Hollywood observed this dynamic with a range of feelings. Some were impressed by the sheer influence, the notion that one individual could unsettle presidents simply by wielding the might of his newspapers. Others felt distinctly uneasy about it, yet all recognized the risks of defying Hearst. An actor who irked him could end up with damaging rumors about their private affairs plastered over his entertainment sections. A director who challenged his views on policy might discover their latest project harshly critiqued by Hearst's critics. A producer who declined to feature Marion's films might abruptly struggle to secure favorable coverage for their other releases. The castle's generous hosting hid unspoken restrictions. Most visitors remained unaware of those constraints, since they never pushed against them. They lounged by the pools, praised Marion's movies, avoided political topics during meals, and departed with fond recollections and valuable contacts. The arrangement functioned seamlessly because few ever challenged its boundaries. But Marion perceived the grim undercurrents. She noticed politicians like senators and governors fawning over Hearst in person, only to exchange exasperated glances once he stepped away. She observed studio leaders chuckling at his quips in the gathering hall, then venting frustration about his meddling upon returning to Los Angeles. She realized that numerous attendees weren't there out of affection for Hearst. They showed up out of apprehension or necessity, and she witnessed Hearst becoming increasingly solitary, even amid throngs of people. He commanded authority. He possessed immense riches. He owned America's grandest estate, yet few companions valued him for more than the benefits he offered. The castle resembled a royal seat, and such seats are solitary spots, particularly when bustling with visitors, especially when those visitors fill the space. Chapter 9. The People Below the Stairs. As film celebrities enjoyed drinks beside the Neptune pool, a separate group sustained San Simeon. The employees, the laborers, the individuals whose identities never graced tabloid mentions, yet whose efforts enabled every lavish gathering. During its height, San Simeon supported over 150 full-time workers. Housekeepers, chefs, groundskeepers, technicians for wiring, pipe fitters, chauffeurs, caretakers for the menagerie, security personnel roaming the estate, phone operators, administrative aides. A team vast enough to manage a lodging facility, a cattle operation, and an exclusive retreat simultaneously, operating in rotations day and night to sustain the facade of seamless opulence. They resided in bunkhouses and employee quarters dispersed throughout the grounds, distant from the primary residence where sightseers might spot them. They toiled extended shifts for pay that qualified as respectable in the 1920s. Though modest given Hearst's vast wealth, and adhered to rigid guidelines on interacting with visitors or the Hearst family. Employees were meant to remain unseen. A housekeeper, tidying a visitor's chamber, had to vanish upon hearing steps approaching. Landscapers tending areas close to the patios would retreat and hide when Hearst or his company emerged outdoors. Chauffeurs idled in sweltering vehicles for hours without protest. Chefs crafted feasts for scores but dined nowhere near the formal hall. The castle was orchestrated to seem self-sustaining through enchantment. Chambers perpetually pristine, landscapes flawlessly manicured, dishes materializing punctually, all without any evident effort. The social gap was unbridgeable. Hearst regarded his team with cool courtesy, but nothing approaching parody. He recalled the chief gardener's identity, but not those of the multiple assistants beneath him. He acknowledged superior performance, yet displayed scant interest in the personal stories of those delivering it. To him, they formed vital elements in the estate's machinery, elements akin to the pipes or wiring. Certain employees remained for years, even generations. The employment offered stability. The surroundings were stunning. Plenty had encountered harsher bosses elsewhere in California. Some departed swiftly, exhausted by the seclusion and inflexible structure. San Simeon lay almost 50 miles from the closest decent settlement. Workers enjoyed scant leisure and few means to venture off-site. For those hailing from rural areas or modest villages, the estate might evolve from a promising venture into a voluntary enclosure. The chefs operated in vast kitchens tucked well beneath the opulent dining area, assembling banquets for 40-plus visitors simultaneously. Following menus Hearst vetted himself. They plated unpretentious fare on exquisite porcelain, fixing ordinary eats for folks who could buy whatever they desired globally. The contradiction wasn't overlooked by them. The housekeepers polished spaces brimming with Renaissance artwork and ancient woven hangings, polishing stone surfaces under vaults hauled from continental chateaus. They pocketed in a month what one of Hearst's vintage seats might fetch. The staff polished the castle to perfection, but they resided in stark bunkhouses equipped with communal restrooms and little in the way of furnishings. The groundskeepers tended to 83 acres of elaborate gardens, featuring rare plants transported from distant corners of the world. They trimmed, irrigated, enriched the soil, and replanted tirelessly to ensure the estate's landscapes remained flawless for visitors who strolled by, seldom noticing the effort invested. On Hearst's whim, when he wanted a mature oak, relocated 50 feet for a better panorama. It was they who handled the relocation. The zookeepers nourished and looked after the menagerie of exotic animals brought in from afar: zebras, elk, bears, monkeys, and others. These creatures proved expensive, unpredictable, and occasionally hazardous. The handlers toiled through all weather conditions, managing wounds, sicknesses, and breakouts. Meanwhile, Hearst gleefully paraded the collection before thrilled guests who marveled at the sight of African beasts roaming California slopes. These same employees labored on the castle's construction with Julia Morgan's teams. They sustained its operations through the peak decades and observed from the sidelines as the wealth funding their wages started to falter. For even as Hearst poured millions into artwork and building projects, he occasionally postponed employee salaries amid cash shortages. While he acquired whole chambers, dismantled from European manners, the staff sought simple fixes for their accommodations and were instructed to hold off. Those who made his utopia operate were the initial ones to suffer when his vast holdings buckled. They stayed devoted, they possessed expertise, they proved indispensable, and they remained largely unseen by the very man whose vision they upheld through their labor and dedication. Chapter 10. Cracks in the Marble. Debt, Doubt, and Isolation. The initial fissures emerged in 1929, though Hearst dismissed them entirely. That October, the stock market plummeted. Financial institutions collapsed. Wealth vanished in an instant. The Great Depression enveloped the nation like an enduring, shadowy season. His publications saw ad revenues plummet as companies trimmed expenditures. Readership declined when jobless individuals could no longer afford regular editions. The steady income stream of prior years dwindled to a sparse, erratic flow. Yet, Hearst persisted with his extravagance. He acquired additional masterpieces. He expanded San Simeon with further chambers. He funded more of Marion's movies. He ran his media conglomerate at maximum capacity. As rivals shuddered or consolidated to endure, he acted as though funds were boundless, as if his domain was impervious to failure, as if financial ruin struck only the common folk, not William Randolph Hearst. His financial advisors warned him differently. His children pleaded for reductions in spending. His executives presented meticulous analyses revealing the monthly growth in the disparity between earnings and outlays. Hearst brushed aside every caution. He had forged his realm through grand visions and audacious investments. To him, retrenching seemed less like prudence and more like defeat. The obligations mounted relentlessly. Art vendors demanded payment for acquisitions from years past. Building efforts at San Simeon devoured millions yearly. Wages for thousands in his publishing network fell due each month unfailingly. Taxes on properties nationwide required settlement. Marion's cinematic ventures, frequently unprofitable, craved ongoing infusions of capital. The hilltop menagerie demanded perpetual, costly upkeep. By 1935, Hearst's debts had ballooned to about $125 million, comparable to roughly $2 billion today. His holdings were immense, yet largely non-liquid. He controlled publications, properties, and expansive art troves valued at hundreds of millions. Still, converting them to ready cash proved too slow to cover his liabilities. In time, lenders intervened. In 1937, a group of bankers seized oversight of Hearst's accounts. They appointed their representatives to supervise his operations and imposed tight caps on his expenditures. They commenced asset disposals. Some papers closed or changed hands. Land parcels were auctioned off, and, most agonizingly for Hearst, they began auctioning his artworks, the gems he had amassed over 40 years. Renaissance canvases, ancient Hellenic statues, Gothic hangings, artifacts that adorned San Simeon and his other residences. Each item, once hand-picked by him, now bore a sale tag. Gimbel's, the New York retailer, hosted a grand public auction of Hearst's hoard. Thousands of artifacts sprawled over several levels. Affluent collectors perused and claimed objects Hearst had salvaged from continental chateaus and aristocratic homes. The press, even outlets that once dreaded him, reported the event as a public embarrassment. The tycoon who had devoted his existence to gathering relics as symbols of invincibility now parted with them piecemeal to satisfy his lenders. Work at San Simeon halted abruptly. Laborers were let go. Designs for additional pavilions and patios were scrapped halfway through. Scaffolding lingered beside incomplete facades. The sprawling estate, which had expanded steadily over nearly 2 decades, came to an abrupt halt. Its partially finished areas were left vulnerable to the elements and the passage of years. Burdened by these developments, Hearst appeared to age rapidly in a matter of days. At 74, his vitality was fading fast. The grand endeavor of his lifetime was now being picked apart by financiers who viewed him as an impulsive youth whose spending had exceeded all limits. The media titan who once shaped national views with a single bold story now required approval, just to use his own fortune. Marion observed his transformation with mounting despair. The dynamic vigor that had fueled him for so long began to ebb away. He grew irritable, reclusive, and obsessed with minor aspects of the residence's furnishings. As the broader powers dismantling his domain slipped beyond his grasp, she attempted to protect him from grim updates, to lighten the mood with humor, to organize gatherings, and to sustain a pulse of life at San Simeon. Yet, the harsh truth could not be concealed. The vision was crumbling. Celebrations at the hilltop retreated in frequency, grew sporadic, and eventually ceased entirely. Being summoned to that elevated retreat no longer ranked as California's premier social prize. Silence enveloped the castle. The workforce shrank to a bare minimum. Entire portions of La Casa Grande were sealed shut to cut costs on warmth and upkeep. Chambers that once resounded with joy and melodies now lay in shadow, secured behind doors, their ornate fabrics and ornate vaults reduced to mere entries on a lender's ledger. By 1947, physicians advised Hearst that residing at San Simeon was no longer feasible. The site's isolation, combined with the treacherous, protracted route, posed risks for urgent medical aid. In an emergency atop that peak, assistance might arrive too late. Proximity to Los Angeles, nearer to medical centers and experts, was essential. In May 1947, William Randolph Hearst departed San Simeon for the final time. He relocated to a leased home in Beverly Hills, more compact, simpler, nearer to the realm he had formerly commanded, and from which he could now only observe passively, drawing closer to his inevitable close. Regardless of his readiness, the castle lingered on its promontory, vacant, hushed, a stone and masonry testament to ambitions that swelled beyond measure, desires that refused restraint, and an individual who learned that even the mightiest dominion harbors a limit. Chapter 11. Leaving the Hill. Compared to the castle, the Beverly Hills residence resembled confinement, diminished spaces, subdued heights overhead, absent spires or verandas, no stone basins extending oceanward, merely an agreeable estate on a serene avenue where an aging figure could diminish unobtrusively. Hearst passed his remaining days wandering those unpretentious interiors, perusing publications he no longer steered, witnessing his domain advance in his absence. Creditors had shored up his accounts by auctioning sufficient holdings to appease them. Yet the toll encompassed all that defined William Randolph Hearst. His media network had contracted. His sway in politics had evaporated. His artworks lay dispersed. And San Simeon, the tangible emblem of his authority and self-assurance, remained deserted on a remote crest he would never revisit. Marion remained by his side. She was under no obligation. By that stage, she possessed her own substantial wealth, accumulated from cinema earnings and personal ventures, separate from Hearst. She might have returned to Hollywood, revived her circle of acquaintances, and broken free from the stifling gradual watch over a formerly commanding presence receding into frailty. Instead, she endured. She persisted amid his worsening condition, his resentful dispositions, his increasing reliance on caregivers, healers, and remedies. She remained because, after 36 years intertwined, departing seemed less liberating than excising a vital fragment of herself. Hearst passed away on August 14, 1951, at 88 years old. Marion was there beside him. His spouse, Millicent, still officially Mrs. Hearst, after years apart, traveled from New York for the service. His 5 sons attended too. Tinseltown dispatched bouquets and formal tributes of admiration. The outlets he had established published extensive remembrances assessing his enduring impact. Marion received no invitation to the rites. The Hearst kin ensured that boundary. She had shared his companionship for over 3 decades, yet never held the title of spouse. With his departure, the clan drew tight. Amid the formal grief, she held no place. 36 years dissolved in a silent decree. Exclusion awaited her. She met it silently, without outward protest. She had anticipated little more. The castle had served as her dwelling, but ownership eluded her. The existence she had forged with Hearst occupied a murky, lawful space that vanished the instant his pulse ceased. Following his demise, the Hearst relatives oversaw it all. The enterprises, the properties, and San Simeon. They confronted a stark, pressing challenge. Upholding the castle demanded vast sums, power for countless chambers, personnel to prevent decay, fixes for structures already battered by prolonged exposure to severe climate and postponed care, levies on the land that struck like retribution. Moreover, the family saw little real purpose in hanging on to a sprawling 240-room Mediterranean villa perched on an isolated California summit. They considered their choices: offload it discreetly to a wealthy tycoon, raze it entirely and chalk the episode up to a regrettable chapter, or simply board it up and allow it to fade away unnoticed. Yet none of these paths seemed fitting. The estate's renown made demolition unthinkable. Its extravagance and oddity deterred quick sales, and its cultural importance, even to them, precluded, leaving it to erode in the mist and gales. By 1957, the Hearst Corporation reached a firm resolution. It gifted San Simeon to California. While retaining the adjacent ranch lands, the family handed over the main house, guest houses, swimming pools, and 123 acres of the summit to the people. The stipulation was straightforward. Transform it into a state historic landmark, safeguard it, and launch guided excursions. This offered a sensible fix for a daunting dilemma. The government would cover upkeep via entry charges. The Hearst legacy would link to enduring splendor instead of a dilapidated shell on a eroding slope. And ordinary folks could at last step into the iconic fortress, which for almost 4 decades had loomed highway visible, yet barred to all but the invited elite. California agreed. Preparations started to repurpose the exclusive retreat as a communal exhibit. Employees were brought on board. Pathways for tours were plotted. Security protocols were enforced. Barriers and placards appeared in areas once trod solely by household help. The stronghold Hearst had erected to regulate worldly access would henceforth welcome ticket holders, trailing along with escorts. Marion Davies observed these developments from a distance. Following Hearst's passing, she never set foot in San Simeon again. The site brimmed with recollections, though none hers in any formal capacity. For years she had pulsed as its vital core, yet chronicles would cite her, at best, in passing. She passed away in 1961, a decade post-Hearst, affluent at ease and mostly overlooked by the Tinseltown that once clamored for her spotlight. The castle endured beyond them. Chapter 12. What lingers of a vision? Initial group visits kicked off in June 1958. Tourists ascended the twisting path that had ferried cinema stars, but these days in coaches rather than sleek cars. For $2 entry, about $20 today, they trailed narrators through chambers echoing subtle traces of bygone wealth and waning drive. Narrators shared a refined, softened account. They presented Hearst as a media mogul and artifact gatherer. They highlighted vaulted Renaissance panels and ancient woven hangings, skipping talk of shuttered outlets or the debts amassed to acquire them. They displayed the Neptune Basin and Gathering Hall, silent on the maneuvers plotted there, or how Hearst once swayed national views from those elevated confines. Marion Davies merited scant notice in the standard narrative. She surfaced as a minor aside, a performer who occasionally dropped by. No word on her 30 years as chief entertainer. Nothing of her discreet aid to faltering performers. Nothing of her steadfast devotion to a partner who couldn't wed her. The past was being refined on the spot, smoothing rough edges for sightseers craving a tidy, palatable tale. Initial guests traversed the halls with varied sentiments. Some marveled at the opulence, others deemed it ostentatious, even absurd. Plenty just puzzled over the spectacle. Design eras clashed. The vastness intimidated. Spanish colonial echoes mingled with Gothic remnants and Italianate pieces, yielding a blend that defied tidy categories. It wasn't a classic old-world royal abode, nor fully a gallery, despite housing gallery-caliber treasures. It evoked an odd fusion. A tycoon's whimsy turned tangible, now accessible like an amusement draw. Some ex-employees slipped into the crowds as fee-paying explorers. They passed zones they'd once cleaned, buffed, or mended. They spotted nuances invisible to strangers. A subtle mark on stone they'd labored to erase. A patio endured under scorching sun. A portal where Hearst had issued commands. They seldom chimed in. Their recollections fell outside the approved tale. The site's communal lore centered on the founder and his celebrity callers, not the crew that truly powered the operation. Officials tackled the site's fortification. Neglect over time had etched damages. Tiles dripped, conduits rusted. Grounds overgrown, revival efforts proceeded gradually, bankrolled by rising ticket prices, as buzz grew about the estate's eerie, captivating magnificence. Reporters revisited San Simeon. Articles in print dubbed it Hearst's extravagance, his emblem of indulgence, his tangible Xanadu. The parallels to Citizen Kane were impossible to ignore. Orson Welles had drawn loose inspiration from Hearst's life for his 1941 movie. And the imagined Xanadu, a sprawling hollow mansion where an isolated magnate perishes amid possessions rather than loved ones, appeared to foretell San Simeon's destiny with unsettling precision. Hearst despised Citizen Kane. He wielded his publications to assault the picture, coerced cinemas against screening it, and sought to suppress it entirely. His efforts fell short. The film evolved into an enduring masterpiece, and today visitors traverse the actual Hearst Castle, silently drawing links to Welles's creation and pondering the extent of the movie's grim depiction. Gradually, interpretations of the castle evolved. It ceased to represent mere triumph and began to resemble a cautionary tale. See the consequences of unchecked fortune and vanity. Observe the remnants after visitors depart and celebrations fade. Gaze upon this stunning yet solitary estate, erected to dazzle crowds who never really valued the figure at its core. Yet crowds persisted in arriving, initially numbering in the thousands annually, then tens of thousands, and eventually hundreds of thousands. The exclusive haven Hearst had fashioned to bar the public transformed into one of California's premier attractions. School children filed along its corridors. Road-tripping families marked it as done. Aspiring architects jotted observations. Global sightseers converged to explore the summit where Tinseltown elites once reveled. The vision Hearst erected to affirm his stature now served the public at large. That twist of fate might have incensed him beyond any scathing article. Chapter 13. Shadows etched in stone. Guided visits revealed only fragments of the narrative. They had no choice. The reality proved too intricate, too disquieting, and too distant from the sanitized tale California preferred for its iconic attraction. Beneath each block at San Simeon lay the conglomerate that financed it, and that conglomerate rested on foundations far murkier than pursuits of fine art and grand design. Hearst's outlets reshaped the nation, though hardly for the better. They blazed trails in a brand of reporting that favored feelings over facts, drama over veracity, revenue over societal benefit. To boost readership, his outlets fabricated or amplified controversies. To ignite conflict, his banners stirred fury. To undermine a rival politician, his lead stories waged war, shattering lives via distortions and orchestrated falsehoods. The Spanish-American War offered the starkest instance, yet hardly the sole one. For years, Hearst's publications fanned alarm over newcomers, targeting Chinese and Japanese enclaves along the Pacific shore. They ran blatant bigoted illustrations and provocative columns that bolstered biased policies and incited assaults. They hyped criminal acts to breed hysteria without enhancing security. They simplified intricate policy clashes into black and white fables, casting Hearst's allies as paragons and foes as villains. This wasn't a mere byproduct detached from San Simeon. It formed the very mechanism enabling it. Each spire, each basin, each transported mural derived from presses that rendered the land more resentful, anxious, and fractured. The fortress awed the eye. Its bedrock festered. Hearst apparently harbored no remorse. He viewed his outlets as voicing realities, shunned by state outlets. He cast himself as a defender of the common folk versus venal power brokers. Even while inhabiting a stronghold that dwarfed most continental aristocrats' abodes, the hypocrisy evidently never gnawed at him. The castle also chronicled a broader U.S. saga from the Gilded Age onward, an epoch where tycoons amassed staggering wealth amid scant oversight or responsibility. Hearst drew his initial wealth from his sire's mines, then ballooned it via a press dominion, immune to curbs on its capacity to deceive, sway, or ruin. He raised San Simeon during days of scant worker safeguards, absent ecological standards, and a chasm between affluent and laboring citizens that grew ever deeper. The edifice's erection drew scores of laborers bunking in Spartan quarters as Hearst slumbered beneath ornate revivalist vaults. The menagerie's rare beasts were plucked from untamed realms without regard for sustainability. The trove of artifacts was gathered by acquiring heirlooms from a war-torn, cash-strapped Europe, sold off by noble lineages bereft of alternatives. Contemporary explorers strolling San Simeon admire splendor and extravagance. Frequently overlooked is the lattice of abuse underpinning it all. The toilers who erected and upkept it. The creatures diminished in nature to adorn a slope enclosure. The old-world lineages compelled by hardship to auction their legacy. Readers of newspapers were swayed to support policies in wars that boosted Hearst's clout, far more than their personal benefits. Drawing parallels to the present feels uneasy, yet it's impossible to ignore. Hearst's approach to media, laden with emotion, lacks on accuracy, designed to seize focus over fostering knowledge, hasn't truly faded away. It evolved into radio broadcasts, television programming, cable outlets, and now, social media streams driven by algorithms. The fundamental strategy remained unchanged: seize eyeballs at all costs, profit from that engagement, and wield the influence to advance personal goals. San Simeon endures as a testament to the endpoint of such a trajectory. Not enduring insight or true esteem, but a breathtaking empty fortress that survived its founder and became a stark warning against mistaking riches for insight, authority for intent, and fame for enduring impact. Each guest strolling by the Neptune pool crosses into what resembles a scene of moral wrongdoing. Not one marked by violence, but by ethical failings, an existence devoted to hoarding excess rather than gaining depth, seizing rather than sharing, proclaiming rather than hearing. The marble retains its allure, but the flaws run profoundly. Chapter 14. Julia Morgan and Marion Davies, the alternative architects. San Simeon's tale extended beyond Hearst alone. Two women influenced its form as profoundly as the man whose title it bears. Still, their contributions were downplayed, obscured, or subtly omitted from the popular historical account. Julia Morgan devoted 28 years to San Simeon. She undertook over 800 journeys from her office in San Francisco to the isolated summit, navigating trains and vehicles across rugged paths. She oversaw the labor teams, tackled the technical hurdles stemming from Hearst's unpredictable visions, and transformed his ever-evolving concepts into durable structures that withstood quakes, tempests, and the passage of time. She embodied genius in every aspect. Her expertise in engineering was remarkable. She grasped substances, weights, pressures, and design boundaries better than almost any contemporary architect. Simultaneously, she possessed an artistic flair for merging discordant styles into a cohesively odd harmony. Hearst insisted on the unattainable. With sketchpad and drafting sheets, Julia Morgan rendered the unattainable tangible. She accomplished this amid struggles Hearst scarcely considered. As a female in a field ruled by men, she encountered perpetual doubt from builders, vendors, and overseers who presumed she had no place amid the construction. She disproved them repeatedly. Though the need to validate persisted, each endeavor demanded she exhibit skills that male peers received unquestioned. Morgan earned solid compensation for her era, but not extravagantly enough given Hearst's reliance on her talents. He appreciated her efforts while exploiting her dedication and expertise. He altered blueprints incessantly, compelling her to revise facades and reassess frameworks. He withheld funds amid financial strains. He sought her input on off days and vacations, insisting on prompt replies to his evening missives and wires. She tolerated it all, viewing San Simeon as the pinnacle assignment of her career, a venture of immense scope and intricacy, unmatched by most. And, once Hearst's funds crumbled and building halted, Morgan was curtly let go. No elaborate send-off, no widespread acclaim for almost 30 years of exceptional service. She retreated to her San Francisco base and resumed modest undertakings until retirement. When California launched public tours at San Simeon, her identity received scant mention. Narrators attributed the creation to Hearst alone, glossing over how Morgan conceived while Hearst financed. The design prowess went to the patron, not the creator. Morgan refrained from public protest. She consistently favored the structure, voicing her merits. Yet the unfairness lingered. The fortress that captivated was equally hers. But chronicles opted to etch just one figure. Marion Davies faced a distinct form of omission. Post Hearst's passing, she was largely excised from the castle's chronicle. The Hearst kin sought to bury the long-term romance from sight. Tour narrators skimmed or silenced her presence. Images featuring her too centrally were swapped or archived. The lively spirit and wit she infused into San Simeon evaporated from the sanctioned recounting. Nevertheless, Marion's imprint reached well past her position as Hearst's companion there. Following his demise, she channeled her substantial wealth, amassed not solely through his aid, but via her own astute ventures, into meaningful causes. She bankrolled pediatric wards. She backed facilities combating polio. She discreetly aided performers and technicians in need from her cinema era. As Hearst dedicated decades to flaunting his influence, Marion devoted her final years to discreetly issuing donations that truly transformed existence. Throughout much of her professional journey, Hollywood's running gag held that her accomplishments arose purely from Hearst's fortune. The reality, however, proved far more intricate. Certainly, he bankrolled her movies and deployed his publications to hype them up. Yet she brought authentic flair that even wary reviewers had to concede. Precise, comedic flair, a relaxed on-screen charm, and a well-earned image for generosity beyond the sets. Her success in the industry might have leaned on Hearst's patronage, but her essence stood independently. That was hers alone. Julia Morgan and Marion Davies each poured years into Hearst's grand ambition. Each proved vital in crafting the essence of San Simeon. One erected the fortress that endures, while the other breathed energy into its spaces. Each shone in her distinct realm, yet both dwindled to mere asides in tales that fixated on a figure who couldn't have forged any of it without them. History is gradually setting the record straight. Contemporary guided visits now cite Morgan explicitly and credit her contributions. Profiles and films portray Marion with greater warmth, emphasizing her devotion and charitable efforts over mere controversy. Experts today view San Simeon as equally a tribute to these two figures as to Hearst. Still, for generations, the estate's narrative portrayed William Randolph Hearst as the lone force, manifesting it through sheer wealth and resolve. That wasn't the case. It never could have been. The castle rises in its precise form and place, thanks to two remarkable women who rendered it possible. Chapter 15. The Hill, the Sea, and the Stories We Leave Behind. Dawn breaks above San Simeon in much the same manner as a century prior. Warm rays inch over the slopes, grazing the pale spires initially, then cascading across patios and fountains. The vast Pacific lies ahead, rippling unyieldingly past the clifftop estate. Sightseers arrive at first light, assembling at the base facility before shuttles transport them along the twisting path. They hail from all corners, vacationing clans, budding designers clutching notepads, history enthusiasts, intrigued wanderers drawn by tales of Hearst Castle, eager to witness the hype. They traverse chambers where Charlie Chaplin once chuckled and politicians struck subtle pacts. They pause in the gathering hall where news stories sparked amid brews and chatter. On occasional elite outings, a handful even step into the Neptune pool for snapshots, trailing toes in waters once graced by cinematic elites. The majority depart awed by the splendor and vastness. Others feel uneasy about the extravagance. A handful ponder deeply the creator behind it and the true message of his saga. William Randolph Hearst craved enduring memory. That's clear. He sought a lasting emblem surpassing his mortality, affirming his stature, demonstrating how a San Francisco youth could erect wonders rivaling royal domains. In that limited regard, he triumphed. The structure persists. His name graces the markers. Scores of visitors flock annually, uttering __2___ aloud. But their recollections diverge from his vision. They recall the opulence. They sense the isolation hinted in vast corridors meant for gatherings that faded away. They grasp the warning embedded within. A narrative of ambitions swelling beyond bounds and hungers refusing restraint. Plenty invokes Citizen Kane, prior to Hearst himself. The castle imparts stark truths on the American ideal. What unfolds when triumph hinges solely on hoarded goods. The divide between crafting grandeur and forging significance. The perils of equating fame with inheritance. Dominance with intent. Belongings with fulfillment. Hearst amassed artworks, territories, scoops, sway in politics, celebrity allies across decades. He passed affluent yet faded, estranged from the summit that marked him. His domain crumbled, his persona morphing into legend and whispers. His creations outlived him, yet they narrate his tale in ways he wouldn't endorse. Still, San Simeon holds a subtly optimistic turn. The manor once barring everyday folk now welcomes them warmly. The domain erected to flaunt one individual's preeminence now levels the field for all. Priority by arrival. Stick to the path. Pupils from humble schools navigate salons tailored for tycoons. Modest sightseers gaze up at vaults salvaged from overseas chateaus. Folks who might have faced derision in Hearst's rags now roam his secluded realm, unchallenged. The emblem of disparity evolved, haltingly, into a modest win for communal entry. Perhaps that's the true inheritance. Not the edifice alone, but its fate once the architect relinquished grip. Not the revelries, but the aftermath when silence fell. This wasn't the vision Hearst first envisioned, but rather how the wider world reshaped the remnants of that vision, once he lost his grip on the narrative. Few of us will ever construct grand estates. We won't command vast enterprises, entertain celebrities, or etch our legacies into school books. Yet each of us crafts modest realms via our decisions, our efforts, the bonds we foster, and how we wield the influence at our disposal. Everyone leaves a tale in their wake, even if it's not immortalized in stone or safeguarded by institutions. The quiet query posed by San Simeon boils down to this. What narrative will you craft? One focused on hoarding or giving back, on dominating others or aiding them? A tale where you're the star of every moment, or one that honors those who supported your achievements. Hearst opted for gathering wealth. He embraced control. He put himself first, and he spent his final days in a leased home, distant from the fortress, meant to symbolize his triumph. The estate endures atop the ridge, stunning yet superfluous, revealing truths its creator never meant to expose. Past it stretches the sea, immense and enduring, surviving news cycles, dominions, and vanities without end. The legacy we forge counts for less than we often assume. But the way we handle others amid that creation holds far greater weight than most grasp. San Simeon serves as vivid evidence of those realities.